Good morning, blessings to everybody as we are starting off the Lenten season. Let's go ahead and begin with prayer. Gracious Lord, bless us as we gather together in your word, that we may grow in faith and understanding, and also in Christian love. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right, so we're continuing the discussion that Paul is having. So what does it mean for the righteous to live by faith? And he gets into some of the nitty-gritty, so to speak. I say that even though he's not going to get terribly specific on things. He's getting into more detail and what that means. And the passage we're getting into here is going to be interesting, partly because of the time frame he's writing this in. And that is the submission to authorities. I can get somebody to read for us chapter 13, verses 1 through 7.
Let every person be subject to authority, for there is no authority except from God. Those that accept it is to do. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will have no judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of who is authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his reward. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrong. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For the same reason, we also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, and attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed.
All right. So, Paul is talking about living under authority. And he actually begins with a very universal statement. He says, let everybody be subject. This isn't just Christians, in other words. It's not just the Jews. It's not just the Christian Gentiles. It's everybody.
Oh, you didn't say atheist.
It's not just the atheist either, but they're part of everybody. Don't be going trying to argue all doesn't mean all.
All is all?
Yep, all is all. So he's saying everybody is subject. So this is a universalizing statement. There is nobody who is not subject to higher authorities. And this is much like what Paul does earlier when he's talking about being subject to the capital L law, the commandments. Everybody is subject to the commandments. Now everybody is subject to earthly rule, and so subject to earthly authorities. So the laws are laws for everyone, not just for some. Which kind of runs contrary, I think, a little bit to how people tend to think about the laws.
That law was made for you, not me.
Exactly. Laws for thee, not for me. And I think all of us are guilty of falling for that thought process, because it's easy for us to rationalize ignoring the laws when they're inconvenient for us.
So, like, of course, I mean, I always follow the law, except for a couple times when it was really hard and ridiculous and stuff.
Yeah,
Except when I didn't feel like I replied.
yeah.
I bet it's probably
Yep, like when you were busy in conversation at one time. I know, it was an accident, so I'm just.
It happens.
Yeah, and you stopped like you're supposed to when the cop noticed it.
Well, you know, at least I didn't, when you asked me that did I realize I ran through that, I was honest, I said, no, I didn't run it, I blew it. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet you'll never miss that stop sign again, though.
I have almost.
But anyhow, so Paul's very much up for it. Everybody has this subject.
Including the people in authority.
Yeah, including people in
They're
authority.
everyone.
Yeah. Because even the people in authority have authority over them. And that's actually a point he makes. He's like, look, there's nobody in authority who hasn't gotten their authority from God. Which means God is over them in authority. While Israel had kings, they're consistently referred to as princes in the Old Testament. Because they weren't the ultimate king. It was an acknowledgement that they are subject to God. I should say they're not consistent, but frequently referred to as a prince, because they're subject to God. So everybody is under authority. Luther, in his lectures on Romans, does, let every person, without exception, no matter how lofty, be subject to the governing authorities, to the higher powers of whatsoever kind. Powers are of differing ranks. For there is no authority except from God, thus we are subject to God in them. And the powers that exist, have been instituted by God, even though those who possess the authority may not have been instituted in it. So everybody has, there are different levels of authority, and which means there's going to be folks with authority that have people with authority over them.
Everybody answers to somebody.
Yeah, everybody answers to something. Military is really nice and straightforward in this. The private is under everybody's authority. The lieutenant, he's under the authority of the captains and the colonels and the generals. As one of my buddies who joined the Army right after being out of college stated, yeah, I take more orders than I give. Because he is of a lower authority as far as officers are concerned.
You didn't hear that it broke downhill?
He knew about it. He'd been in the Corps Cadets before leaving, before graduating from A&M, so he already had an idea what he was into. But he just come back one weekend and was visiting. I want to say it was because his fiance was graduating. I can't remember now. It's been so long. Yeah, but we knew each other at church. He was talking about. Yeah, as a freshly minted lieutenant, I take a lot more orders. And he's like, and half the time, I'm getting suggestions, which are basically orders from June Sergeant. and to be fair, and my dad, who was military, said, yeah, when you're the fresh butter bar lieutenant, when your sergeant tells you something as a suggestion, you might as well take it as an order because he's talking from experience. And it might save your neck. And then you just keep going. There's always somebody in authority. And even the 5-star generals, the people that they jokingly refer to as God on earth, has authority over them.
President.
The president, yeah.
I was thinking that, I mean, when the people high up in authority forget that they have people above them, they aren't affected by law, that is not a good country, society, place to be.
Mm-hmm. In fact, much of history's issues revolve around people who forget there's authority above them. And which is interesting here because Paul's writing about being under Caesar.
Sometimes Exhibit A.
And which is kind of Exhibit A of authority who forgot he's under authority. The generally accepted time frame for the writing of Romans is when Nero is Caesar, and Nero was not. Well, to say wasn't a good ruler is probably to put it mildly. So, have y'all seen Ridley Scott's Gladiator? Came out back in the 90s.
2000.
Was it 2000?
Pretty sure.
As far as 90s. But early 2000s, stars Russell Crowe.
Oh, yeah.
Got a new Gladiator.
Yeah, they got a sequel out, and I'm still, how in the world is that? I can't bring myself to watch it because I'm at the, how in the world is that supposed to work? Because the storyline for the original movie was a story. But anyhow, Commodus, the Caesar in that is partly based on him. And
He's also just based on himself.
I was going to say, I say partly because Commodus was also a real Caesar, and he was also just as bad as Joaquin Phoenix's Commodus.
I'm pretty sure Commodus, the historical Commodus, was the one who brought his horse into the Senate and said he was a senator. So don't know what point he was making or whatnot.
I actually I don't think he was that one.
I
think
he
was the one who thought he was Hercules or something like that.
In any case, the Pax Romana was considered right to have ended with the death of his father.
But anyhow, so if you watch that, you can kind of get an idea. Dr. Paul Meyer has a great little bit of discussion of. I remember which lecture I heard it in. I don't think it was Paul's missionary journeys. I think it was when he was discussing the 3 legs of studying history. But anyhow, he talks about Paul is waiting when all this stuff is going on, and Nero is in the midst of trying to assassinate his mother, survive assassination attempts, all these different things.
Martin Luther criticizing poor people of the poverty war against them.
Yeah, we want to take a look at Luther here. Luther actually wrote 2 letters in response to what's called the Peasants' Revolt, where one letter is absolutely thrashing the people for revolting because they are rebelling against the authority God placed over them. And then he wrote another letter to the Christian nobility, raking them over the coals for giving the peasants a reason to revolt. That they're not living up to the authority that they've been given, and that they should respect the authority that's over them, namely God. Yeah, Julie.
Anyway, just hitting our Roman history, you are correct. It was, in fact, Emperor Caligula who, according to legend, brought his horse to make a consul. And, in fact, That was shortly before Nero, so Paul would have lived under him.
Okay, so
Although, according
you know,
to
now that I think about it, it was actually Caligula that Romans was written. Right? Nero was emperor when Paul was in prison in Rome.
well,
So
I
did
don't
have that
know, but I
fact.
thought they said Romans they thought was written in the 50s. Caligula was emperor, oh gosh, from 37 to 41 AD. So
Okay.
that would have been shortly after the death of, well, 2 years.
Okay.
And
Either way, it's written under an emperor who's probably not that great. And Paul's telling him, guess what? You're subject to it. So, anyhow, so Paul is making it very clear. Everybody is subject to the authorities placed upon earth. Luther helps us in understanding just how broad a statement that is. As he brings up a great point with this phrase, to the higher powers of whatsoever comes. So this is not just one particular kind of authority. This isn't just, governors, the princes, and the kings. This is any number of authorities.
I was thinking parents, teacher, guildmaster.
Yeah. He includes, as I put in my notes, not only does he include kings, presidents, etc., but also judges, law enforcement, and teachers. And he really does draw out this idea in the explanation to the Fourth Commandment in both the large and small catechisms. So, Fourth Commandment is to honor your father and your mother. And he does that because he identifies the Fourth Commandment as the establishment. And that he would actually describe the king as father of fathers. So that he is the father of his country. So that so he has been placed in authority as a parent to the country. And so we have this establishment of authority, and it takes many different levels and of different kinds. Yeah, Julie.
I was thinking that, thinking about it as, the father of the country, it's like really clear about how you're supposed to be using your authority for good citizens or whatever. Not, for your own good, because like what parents do to raise their kids up for the benefit of the kiddos, good people, and not, lord it over. I think C.S. Lewis gave a comparison, like with education, it's supposed to be like a parent, a mother bird or father bird teaching their baby bird how to become an adult bird to get the best of what you have, not like a bird keep raising up birds for eat.
Yeah.
That you're educating them for their good, not yours.
Yeah.
How do you figure in American Revolution? If you put this up there, King should have stayed as father king over them.
Jimmy, you touched on a topic that is still debated today. Because the question here is, what do we make of things like the American Revolution? Now, those of us who have grown up here in the U.S., a couple hundred years now after the revolution happened, have largely grown up with the rah, 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 yay, American colonials and establishing us as an independent and free nation. And it's not really as clear cut as that.
I think it's easy.
And especially within the eyes of the church, because there's a running debate. It's still debated to this day. Was it legitimate that we rebelled against the king?
Yes.
With some making one argument, some making another argument.
I mean, it's even worse if you think about the Texas Revolution, which doesn't have nearly as many of the mitigating factors as the American Revolution.
Yeah, and so at the time, you'll find churches split up. Even within the Lutheran Church, there was a divide between the pastors. What should we do? And even with pastors, who weren't like really big fans of King George and the Parliament were doing at the time.
So we shouldn't have toppled Caesar either.
Hmm?
So we shouldn't have toppled Caesar either.
Well, we didn't topple Caesar.
The Romans?
No, we didn't topple the Romans. The Romans fell of their own accord.
Oh, no.
And it would have helped from the pagan laws.
Yeah, though it did help that after a point, there were Christian Caesars. And we have Constantine as the first Christian emperor. He converted after becoming Caesar.
Rome kind of fell from the inside out.
Yeah, it did. And it did have some outside help.
Yeah.
But it was a crumbling facade to begin with.
I mean, the Christians were blamed for it at the time sometimes, but like it was more in the sense of that Christians would look at join up with the Roman bureaucracy or to go do something else, and increasing numbers of talented young people went something else.
Yeah.
But they weren't raising arms against in general.
Yeah.
In general,
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
not
So
raising
we
arms.
didn't raise arms. In fact,
No, they did with him.
But
They did with him. It was the people who rebelled.
it wasn't so much as that the people rebelled against Rome, as Rome fell apart to its own abundance.
Politicians being politicians.
There's a reason why there are a lot of historically minded political voices and even theological voices who are making a lot of comparisons between the United States now and the latter centuries of Rome.
I always thought that.
They were at the height of their opulence, and they had almost, comparatively speaking, a life of ease. Very similar to what we've experienced here in the U.S., at least for the entirety of my life. I'm born in mid-70s, and yeah, there were some tough economic times in those, but most of those actually just kind of scared me by because I was a kid. And Dad had a steady job that was relatively guaranteed. He was military and a mid-grade officer, so with a flight pay. So we generally didn't hurt economically speaking, but you could see problems around, and I could hear Mom and Dad talking. I knew it existed, but I didn't feel it. And while, yeah, sometimes it meant I couldn't get the toy I wanted because it was expensive. I really didn't want. We always had plenty of food, had a nice house, we were able to go do nice things, all that kind of stuff.
It depends on where you're at in society and the food chain. Like you say, he had a position, father did, where he was going to get a paycheck regardless. And I know, like my mother used to tell me about the Great Depression. She grew up on a farm in North Dakota. they didn't even know there was a depression.
Mhm.
My father, on the other hand, him and my grandfather bummed around picking cotton, standing in food bread lines and things
Yeah.
like that because they had nothing. He ended up in one of Roosevelt's 3 C's schemes.
Yeah,
You know, different parts of society and
yeah. And the
See,
same thing
it's
existed and will always exist. But the idea here is an overarching state of things. And
At least for the people that were in charge, and there were a lot of people who were kind of in the upper classes, life is good.
yeah, and and when you get to those points, you begin to expect that this is actually normal, and that it's just how it's supposed to be. And then when things don't follow that, you have a mental and societal collapse, and we're kind of hitting it really.
I think one thing with the elites of Rome was that this, like, right, Rome had always been there, would always be there. They didn't think, any individual person didn't think they had to worry about trying to keep building Rome up because Rome couldn't fall. It could fail. So they were so busy in the bureaucracy, where everybody was worried about getting their own little piece of pie and building up their own reputation and building up their own this and their own that. And nobody was really thinking about building up Rome because Rome didn't need it.
Yeah.
It was great. And then, so it was getting hollowed out. A whole bunch of people not bothering to maintain it, maintaining themselves. And by the time that became obvious, it had already been hollowed out.
like persecution of the Christians. You know, you could have one person, you know, in the government in Rome, you know, blaming the Christians, want to persecute them to take the heat off of themselves.
Mhm.
You know, to take away the blame and put it on them, and that's what they did.
Yeah, and that did happen. And to be fair, there was some argument for it because as Christians grew in number, one of the things that started drying up was the funding from the pagan festivals. Those were a major source of tax and income for the merchants and local municipal authorities.
Small business.
Yeah, small businesses and all that kind of good stuff. So, and Christians are like, we're not going to participate.
I know.
And we're not going to stop you from doing this, but we're not going to show up. And so they, as Christian, when we were small, that wasn't a big deal. So what? There's a group of 30 families over here. They're not doing anything. But we've got 15,000 families participate. Now when you start getting like 6,000, 7,000, you start talking really real money, and governors were feeling that. They start cracking down on the but going back to the thing here is now we've got authority. And we're supposed to be submitting to whoever is an authority. Regardless of the authority position, as long as that position of authority is over us, we submit to the authority. So, for example, here we'll use Luther's inclusion of teachers. As students, one of the things we do is we obey our teachers as we would obey our parents. And so when our teachers are asking us and directing us to do things, we're listening to them. Now, we're supposed to do our homework. We're supposed to, be quiet in class and listen and learn and all these kind of things. And Paul here is, all right, so those authorities are over you, and you need to be submitting to them as God placed them there over you. So if you disobey the teacher, now you're acting against God because you're authority.
And if the teacher's teaching God?
Well, we're going to get to that in a bit, but needless to say, it doesn't falsify the proposition that all authority comes from. Grief. I'm having a lot of trouble with the lights causing the light bulbs in my eyes today. My eyes are dry, so everything's kind of fuzzy to begin with. If I put my glasses on, it just makes it worse. It's going to be a fun day when I gotta be able to read. But anyhow, so he's like, regardless of the authority, we're to be submitted. So the police officers, they have been placed over authority over us in regards to enforcement of the law. So we are to submit to them as rightful authorities. Same with judges. Same with our parents. So each of them are roles of authority that we're to submit to. And we don't really have a choice on them. Now, along the lines of Susie's statement, well, what if the teacher's teaching against God? Well, that brings me to the question, does the fact that all authority comes from God, does that mean God has authorized evil? Or authored evil, as some would say? Paul is going to take us down, just as our individual sins does not mean God authored evil, neither do the sins of the individual mean authored evil. What we can see is the abuse of the authority that they've been given. So your teacher who's teaching against God, say they're teaching the idea that it's okay for boys to be girls. We can say that they are acting against the authority that they've been given because they're clearly violating what God has given to us. Boys are boys and girls are girls.
Sometimes you got to put a little common sense with it.
Yeah, well, you would say that, but the longer I've lived, the more I realize common sense isn't actually common.
Well, it's just like, you talk about the police, judges, and all the other parts of the government that we've got. And you think, well, think what it would be like if we didn't have it.
Yeah.
Then you own a grocery store. Everybody just run in there and take everything, and there's no consequences, Nobody's going to stop them or make them put it back or throw them in jail or anything. We can't live like that.
Oh,
that's anarchy.
Yeah.
And I have that going on now. With the Walmarts and the Targets and stuff. And load the basket up and push it out and they won't stop them.
I do find it interesting that a lot of the mayors who put those policies into place aren't mayor anymore.
I mean, when I heard that, I thought that was the most ridiculous thing that shoplifters are allowed to put it out at the door.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can experience the fallout from that. To use an example of what's happened in some cities where they decided, as long as you don't steal over a certain amount, we're not going to prosecute
put
at
a
all.
dollar limit on.
Yeah. So retail theft just exploded. And that's the nature of sin. Sin, if it's given an inch, is going to just go ahead and take 10 miles. And at the same time, so what happened as a response to that? Well, everybody who had the money said, all right, we're just pulling up roots. We're going to close our stores and everything. And so complete areas became retail deserts. They're like, it's just not worth keeping a store open.
The problem with that is the evil follows you. And once, if everybody runs away, they don't try to stop it, then as soon as whatever they left is completely consumed, then those
Well-
people are gonna move.
Well, and as I said, it just is going to compound itself. And so there are now cities where they had those policies in place, where new people were elected, and they're like, yeah, we're going to get rid of these policies. They didn't really broadcast it either. I'll use San Francisco as an example because it's on paper. I'm not lining anything right now. They'd stopped prosecuting car break-ins. And so San Francisco became notorious for car break-ins, so much so a famous YouTuber made a video where he put package bombs, prank bombs, into cars so people would steal them, and then they'd blow up on whoever stole them, spray them with glitter and fart spray and all that kind of fun stuff. Well, not too long ago, San Francisco said, yeah, we're done with that. We're going to start prosecuting these things again. You can look at the graph where you just see this exponential rise and car break-ins, and then all of a sudden it's, it almost marks exactly when they started feeling the pinch of prosecutors and cops prosecuting those break-ins.
Well, Dollar General here in Cylinder, they had to shut down their self-checkout stuff.
Mhm.
They had to
Yeah. Julie, I saw you raising your hand.
I was just thinking, like, with allowing, bad things to happen to other people. The usual Spider-Man origin stories are kind of an extremely pointed example of when you decide to allow people to do bad stuff to someone else. It doesn't just stay happening.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not familiar with Spider-Man the origin story, the basics of it is Peter Parker, he gets his spider powers, and to make a bit of money because he wants to impress a girl, he goes and he signs up to wrestle at an underground wrestling league. Ends up where the guy who's in charge of the gate just rips him off. And in response to the guy ripping him off, and the guy robs the office, he doesn't stop the robber, even though he could have. And that robber goes on to kill his uncle. Yeah. So, yeah, very pointed, evil just compounds. And so, one of the things that ends up happening is when we have evil rulers, is we feel the compounding nature of sin. And that can take all sorts of different forms. It can take the form of rulers who aren't doing what rulers are supposed to do in maintaining law and order. It can also take the form of rulers who are abusing what they're supposed to be doing. You could take the French kings and French nobility in the lead up to the French Revolution. With the whole, I know it's an apocryphal saying, let them eat cake. In response to the fact people were starving. They didn't have any bread to eat.
Queen of France. Queen of France.
Queen Antoinette.
Terminally out of touch with what's happening.
Yeah. Or even to a little bit more recent history, Hitler and his Lebensraum and Final Solution. Where he's supposed to care for the people of Germany, and he warps it into the destruction of a whole people group and an excuse to conquer the rest of Europe.
He was mental.
Yeah, he was also probably hopped up on drugs too.
Well, however, thinking chosen place was blonde hair, blue eye, and he wasn't blonde hair or blue eye.
Yeah, it's always amazing the exceptions the rulers draw. Yeah, Julie.
I was thinking, well, both, you know, the way that people joked that it was dangerous around his son-in-laws, that he was so busy worrying about somebody that was going to overthrow him, that, you know, killing them first. And I was, you know, and even now with the whole Epstein files and whatever that is, at least some subset of I guess, thinks they can do anything they want. Because,
Yeah.
and I suppose as a practical matter, apparently they can. But that's not what they're.
Yeah, and so what we should look at when we're looking at this is we can look at it and go, yeah, what they're doing is wrong. God's not the one who's to blame for them doing. They're the ones to blame for them doing their own wrong, just as we're to blame for our own doing. So.
Does that give us the right to shut them down?
No. Because we're not the one placed in authority over them.
I suppose, like, the point being is that whatever legal remedies you have, use, but if the legal remedies are not enough, then that's why you cry out to God. As
Yeah, we cry out to God, and then God will take matters into his own hands. Now, where did so take Old Testament Israel as an example. They dealt with that, a lot of evil. So what does God do? He raised up Nebuchadnezzar and leveled Israel. Dragged all the ruling class into captivity, and a whole bunch of other things happened. Go back and read Ezekiel and you'll get an idea. God saying,
God shut him down?
one can definitely argue that, in that God raised up other powers to shut down Hitler. We could also say the same thing about, say, Stalin. God raised up other powers to shut them down. Now, he didn't do so through a really bloody means there. Really what happened with the Soviet Union is they tried to outspend us.
I was thinking, even at Stalin, why, I mean, he died of natural causes, to the best of my knowledge, but even the Soviet rulers that came after him disavowed to a point some of what he'd done.
Yeah. Because I can remember reading someplace where Soviet leadership was disheartened by the fact we're spending billions and billions of dollars on defense, and then turning around and spending even more than that on entertainment.
I'm not sure that says great things about our culture, but there we are. We had more money than them.
And they bankrupted themselves trying to build up forces. So yeah, it doesn't say, may not say much to us, but again, it's just, it's not up to us to determine who gets to rule or not so to speak. But at the same time, we also trust God. He's going to take matters into his hands.
Sometimes I look at it like as God looks at something and, you know, say like when he destroyed, you know, the Jews there in Canaan, and that, he just takes a big pencil with an eraser and just erases it and starts over.
And yeah, we probably could kind of look at it that way. But the long and short of it is, and we're going to wrap up here, is evil rulers are not the fault of God. Evil rulers are the fault of the rulers themselves. Yeah. With that, we got to wrap up because I'm out of time. We're actually over time now. So let's close with the Lord's Prayer. Let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
You know,